father and our family would like to thank each and every one of you here today. To the relatives, friends, and co-workers who have listened and lent support during the past 8 years, we will never forget your kindness. Thank you to the staff of Bridges at of Westwood for their care. In particular, the care aides Kenson and Marie and the hospice nurse Michelle were so kind to my mother. Our gratitude also to Cartwright, St. Francis, and Father Gerald. As we've tried to pull together plans this week, I've thought about Mom's confounding ability to be the ultimate procrastinator and yet still pull off the impossible at the last minute all on her own. When she was determined to get something done, nothing stood in her way. During the '86 World Series, Mom stood in line outside Fenway, but the tickets sold out by the time she reached the window. Without hesitation, she followed a strange man into an alleyway on Lansdowne and returned home with 5 scalped Mets bleachers seats for our family. When we were little, she stripped all the wallpaper in the house and painted the rooms herself, but not before letting us draw on the bare walls, a simple gesture that was so exciting to a child. She was a petite woman, but she was as strong as an ox. Once, my husband mentioned he had purchased a new sofa and hadn't gotten around to hauling out the old one. Next night when we got home from work, the sofa was gone. My mother had driven to our place in Southie, rounded up 2 Boston police officers who were working in street detail, and convinced them to haul out and dispose of the couch. When I was a senior at Boston College, Mom was helping me move into an apartment with 5 roommates. The girls and I were chatting about ways we could prop up our bed frames to make more storage, and then we hopped on the T to go shopping. When we returned a few hours later, something seemed amiss. One of my roommates called out, "There are cinder blocks under all of the beds." My mother had purchased 24 cement blocks, lifted them and placed them under all 6 beds, and then, like Santa Claus, she quietly slipped away. Mom did not have the opportunity to go to college when she was young, but she proudly told the tale of how after high school she applied for a secretarial job at the old John Hancock building. The applicants were given a typing test, and when it was revealed that Mom could type 90 words per minute, she was whisked upstairs to become the private secretary to one of the executives. Mom loved that job. One day, a young man came in to interview with her boss. When Mom asked him how he would like his coffee, he quipped, "Hot." She gave him a blank stare, unimpressed at his attempt at humor. Kevin was enamored from the start and did not give up. When he proposed marriage, Patty was hesitant. She knew he was entering the Marines and the deployment to Vietnam was inevitable, and the life of a military wife would entail much time apart. She prayed on it carefully, and in the end, love won. Kevin was in flight training in Kingston, Texas, when he got woken up by the petty officer to take a phone call at 1 o'clock in the morning. "Do you still want to marry me?" she asked. They were married on September 2nd, 1967. In July 1968, Mom walked Dad to the gate at Logan and he departed for Vietnam. Years later, she told him she'd been so upset she got lost. She wandered through Logan Central Park for over an hour until a tow truck driver scooped her up and drove her around the airport till he found her car. 13 months later, she was back at Logan to pick up Dad, barely recognized him as he'd lost over 35 pounds. Once she got her hands on him, she found the car keys late and probably took him right home for a good meal. Mom was a passionate writer of poetry and children's literature. She treasured her Keats and Shelley books. Emily Dickinson, Tasha Tudor, and Shel Silverstein were her favorites to share with us kids. She owned dozens of fabric-covered journals and filled them all. She would write furiously in them while sitting at Little League games or riding shotgun on foliage strips. There were never enough pages. Gifts for Mother's Day and birthdays were easy. You just walked uptown to Walden Books and got more journals. Photography was her other passion. It started with a magnolia tree in our backyard. Mom loved to photograph the various stages of the tree, crafting it into a children's book. Being turned down by publishers did not dim her passion for writing and pictures. While it was difficult for us to understand why shooting dozens and dozens of the same shot of the same flower, each one was precious to Mom. The Kodak store in Needham, and later table, her books and essays spread around her, and her beloved Smith Corona typewriter nearby. In May 1987, Mom proudly wore the red cap and gown and received her bachelor's degree in English literature from Boston University. She loved to drive and had a penchant for speed, occasionally hitting 90 while bombing down Route 3 from the Cape. She drove with 2 feet, which ensured lots of sudden stops and starts. She affectionately referred to Route 128 as the Indianapolis 500, and she earned the name Old Leadfoot from our dad. In the 90s, Chris shared his love of Bruce Springsteen with Mom. Later, when Chris was living in Ireland, Mom got Springsteen tickets at the Garden and took me with her. At the time, I was pregnant and a bit cranky. I made Mom promise we could slip out of the Garden just before the encore to get ahead of the crowds. Sure, she promised. When the time came, I took off up the aisle towards the exit. There's a moment at the end of a Springsteen concert where every light in the arena goes up, and the first notes of Born to Run start to play. At the top of the stairs, I realized I was alone. Way back down the long aisle, still in her seat, she was illuminated by the lights and dancing up the storm. Patty dedicated her life to her family, and as her children grew into adults, she enjoyed our company as much as ever. She loved to scoot into Southie to the camera store on Dry Dock Ave and then meet Matt for some appies. When Kevin Cabral, Rika, and Rebecca came into our lives, it was a joy for Patty. More people to buy gifts for. Watching her 3 children marry people she had come to love gave her so much happiness. But grandchildren were the absolute joy of Patty's life. Nana pulled out all the original Fisher-Price Little People of the 70s and the Star Wars figures of the 80s that she had carefully saved for decades. And oh, did the little grandchildren love to play at her dining room table and in the sunlight beneath her. She was the photographer on hand when they dipped their baby toes in Nantucket Sound for the first time, and loved walking them up and down Cold Storage Beach and running the garden hose in the backyard in Dennisford. Heaven and Stephen and Patrick and Annika and Brendan, thank you for being the greatest joy of Nana's life. Alzheimer's is a brutal, heartbreaking disease that takes away so much of a person, but we have been so blessed. Even when she could no longer walk or speak, Mom smiled often, still occasionally threw her head back and laughed. And best of all, she pursed her lips and shook her head a little when she saw something that she somehow didn't approve of. It was the exact look I got all through my teenage years. Through it all, her most beloved soulmate, Kevin, was her constant. The way I've watched my dad dedicate himself to my mother has at times brought me to my knees. In her final years, when he had done all he could do to ensure her physical needs were met, he focused on her spiritual needs. Thanks to Dad proactively bringing the church to Patty, I can say with 100% certainty that she is watching us now from the most beautiful place any of us could ever be. Mom, we love you forever and know you